right. Hey, Vikings fans, welcome into episode 30 of the Skol Hop. I'm Evan.
And I'm Austin.
We're just a couple of dudes from Iowa. We like drinking beer. We like talking about the Vikings.
Yeah, we do. Skol.
Skol.
Oh, no, we need to redo that.
Redo. Better.
That was a little bit better. We got too much of the like hollow sound to it. We need a nice clink.
We need to go like down here, not...
See, and I think we just both need to go up towards the top.
Really?
All right, one more time. We'll do it live. We'll do it live. We'll get it. This is 30 episodes in. We should have this perfected.
We have a third microphone, so maybe we can put that microphone here and capture the sound of the clink.
What if we like go unorthodox and go clink from the... Hold on, that's gonna like break a glass.
Yeah.
No, you know what? We're doing it. I got really scared there
Everything
for a second.
just bubbles up and the beer goes everywhere.
That's true. All right. Well, we've scolded about 4 times now.
If you have advice on how to properly toast with beer,
yeah,
specifically beer in a football mug, because that's what we drink out of every week.
Is it a mug?
Sure.
Glass.
I don't know.
It's made of glass.
If you have tips, drop them in the comments.
And if you're still here, because we might have just driven off the 5 listeners that did show up. I feel like this little opening here was perfect for visual enjoyment. So check us out. You can watch us on Spotify and YouTube. This might end up being like a TikTok clip. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But yeah, we need some scolding tips.
That's right.
Because apparently we're just in our own heads.
Could be. Well, we did realize that I leaned back too far, so I made the concerted effort to go. I mean,
that was our worst whatever.
Well, we were just demonstrating.
I was going for it.
You were going for it?
Yeah.
Man, should we just do a whole episode of us trying to get this right?
No, because we're going to break a glass. And one of us is going to get a glass shard in our hand. And
this is too dark of a beer to spill
and too
on
good
my
of
white
one.
carpet, too.
Yeah.
So we should talk about the beer, though.
Yeah, we should.
We've got a tradition of only drinking Iowa beer on our episodes, and you brought the beer today, so
yeah. So
tell us about it.
This is from No Coast Beer Company. I believe we've had... So I'm going to be a little confused about this. This is the 3rd time you and I have enjoyed a No Coast beer on the Skol Hop. However,
one of those times we haven't released yet.
Yeah, so the first time was the No Coast, was it Make Waves, or was that the second time?
I think that's the unreleased episode was Make Waves.
So the first time was the No Coast Van Gogh.
Yes.
With the really cool Van Gogh.
Super cool can art with the like Volkswagen van.
Yeah. And the second time, which we just won't talk about anymore, we'll just let you guys find out when you find out. But we have enjoyed No Coast a second time. Now this is our 3rd time having a No Coast beer. And it's a Nitro beer. To my knowledge, they have at least 3 different Nitro beers. The S'mores, what was the other one?
The coffee, and then the one that we're having tonight, the cookies and cream. You and I don't think have really ever had Nitro beers before. I think the only other like Nitro drink I've had is that like Nitro Pepsi that they made. I don't know if it's still out, but they made it a couple of years ago. I haven't even really had like a Guinness or anything like that. Like nothing like that. So You've never had a Guinness?
I mean, I don't think I have. I'm sure I have.
I've had a Guinness.
Yeah, but is that a Nitro beer?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good. Let us know. But yeah, so there's even instructions on this can on how to pour it, because with the Nitro, it needs like a hard pour.
Yep.
So you have to like invert the can 3 times and then open it and then do a hard pour.
Also known as the Austin pour.
The Austin pour. And it's patent pending, all right?
Patent pending. Love it.
And what we have is by far and above the darkest looking beer maybe I've ever had, but definitely the darkest beer we've had on the Skol Hop.
It's very dark.
If you want to get our first sip reactions, check out TikTok. But what was your first reaction of this beer?
It was malty. Like we could just smell the malt before we even tried it. You could just smell it coming off of the top of the glass. It's very strong. And you even mentioned after taking your first sip, like it sticks with you after a while.
Yeah,
like,
the flavor, but it's nice in a nice way. Like
yeah. It's definitely an experience beer. It's not one that like you're just shotgun. You're not shotgunning one of these beers. You could, but I don't think that's the best way to enjoy it. Yeah, it's definitely an enjoyable beer, something that you want to take your time with a little bit.
It's smooth. It has some sweeter tasting notes, which would be the cream. But then it's also got the more maltier, chocolatier vibe, which would be the cookies. We both kind of noted that even though this isn't the s'mores beer that No Coast also makes, which we might have to try soon.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
We get some like roasted marshmallow vibes.
And I think that's the malt that you're talking about. It's definitely got like a toasted, roasted flavor to it. Overall, this beer has surprised me a lot. I wouldn't normally ever grab a beverage or a beer or anything that said cookies and cream, just because I'm not a huge sweet tooth guy. I'm not anyone that if you gave me a beer that said, sugary donut filled with pudding, like I'm not gonna be super excited to open that beer up. So I don't know. I like this beer a lot. I feel like cookies and cream, it's not the initial thought that I have when I taste this beer.
Yeah, I don't either, but the more I've had of it now, which has only been about that much.
Yeah.
I'm starting to pick up on it a little bit. Like it's smooth. I can taste the sweetness, and then I can also taste the chocolatiness of it.
Yeah.
So I think all of that combined is what they were going for.
Overall, it's good. I'm a big campfire guy. I love sitting by the fire, and like if I could spend every Friday night by a fire, like that'd be awesome. I feel like this is the perfect like light a fire, sit back, clear stars, starry sky, have one of these beers like that. That's where I'm picturing the perfect place to have one of those. So I like it a lot. You like it a lot?
I do. Yeah. And I'm with you too, for the record. Like this isn't one that I would reach for. In fact, I told you when you walked into my house that I've seen these before. I've seen all three of the No Coast Nitro series, or at least the three that were on the shelf at our grocery store. Perhaps there are more. I don't know. But I thought about grabbing them, and I go, well, that just seems a little bit off the beaten path for what we typically like to enjoy on the Skol Hop. So maybe I'll save that for another time.
Yeah, but if we're going to go through all the Iowa beers that we can, possibly, eventually we're going to have to try them all. We tried is it Reunion that made the Cobbler Gobbler?
Cobbler Gobbler.
And that surprised both of us. I think we could still get our hands on that. Yeah.
I had some not too long ago, actually, with my wife. It was good.
So I like this a lot. This will not be the last 2 or 3 cookies and cream or any of the Nitro No Coast beers that I have. Definitely not one that you're going to have 6, 7, 8, 9 of them probably, just because it is a very defining flavor in a good way. But I think eventually it might just be like, oof, I need to have something less flavorful.
Yeah, for sure.
But 2 or 3, absolutely. This is a fantastic beer.
Yeah, good stuff. And once we've gotten through a few, we can maybe give a more fully formed opinion.
Yeah, and this may be the longest we've talked about a beer so far.
Could be. We've talked for a while, but I mean, when you try something new, you gotta process that. Yeah, and so it's been good. There's a lot to process in Vikings world.
There is.
The news is really starting to pick up. We kind of hit that like post Super Bowl lull. Everything was kind of quiet for a week or two, and now we're really ramping up towards free agency, which starts in a week.
Yeah, and the combine will do that. That's when the NFL world, for the most part, I guess there was a couple of head coaches that didn't go this year, but for the most part, the NFL world, NFL media, they all converge on Indianapolis.
Yep.
A lot of stories come out. A lot of fluff and BS come out. Hashtag Mike Florio. And a lot of details are, flushed out too. So like when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, pretty much he's asked the question about like the trading Justin Jefferson scenario. And Kwesi, by all purposes, says no, I've never even thought about that. Which felt different than when Rick Spielman twice said I have no intent to trade Percy Harvin or whatever. That felt like, coach speak. It felt like the legalese of saying something without saying it. When Kwesi said I couldn't even imagine that, or whatever the exact quote was. It felt genuine to me. Honestly, anytime Kwesi speaks, I feel like he's not one to blow smoke or fluff things up. If he says something, you can take it.
He's very careful with his words, very conservative. You can tell he's calculated. He has prepared for pretty much any situation that he's going to encounter in any sort of interview, and he's got a response ready to go. And he's not going to sit there and blubber away about stuff that previous GMs may have, blow smoke or whatever.
I feel like GMs and coaches are notoriously good, kind of like politicians. They're really good at like giving long answers that sound like they're detailed, but ultimately when you analyze what they say, it's like they didn't really even say anything. Like nothing substantial. And sure, we could probably go and find 10 quotes from Kwesi where he didn't really say anything. But like every time I hear him speak, whether you're a fan of him or not, my jury's still out on him a little bit. I skew towards he gets a passing grade from me. I'm still okay with what he's doing. He's still kind of got that grace period for me, at least. But anytime I hear him speak, I skew a little more towards like, okay, I like this guy. Like he's not just the kid holding the PlayStation controller playing Madden. Like there's some thought to what he's doing. It's just going to be different than what normal NFL fans or even GMs and stuff would think that you should do. So yeah, I think he's well spoken and well thought out, and I'm excited to see how he handles his third offseason.
It'll be a defining offseason for him.
Oh,
for
yeah.
Sure.
One that, I mean, I keep hearing the people talk about that quote from the Bills GM, Bean. If that's his name, I should know. But where he basically said, like, yeah, a lot of people were upset when we traded all that, when we gave up so much to draft Josh Allen. But my thought process was like, if it works, awesome, I'm a hero. And if it doesn't, who cares? I'm not going to be employed here anyway. So, like, gotta swing for the fences. And I like that mindset from a GM, although it's scary because if he gets fired, like, he will just have been the Vikings GM for a few years. Whereas us, like, yeah, we're just a couple of dudes, but like, we're fans. Like, if we're still alive 50 years from now, we're still going to be Vikings fans. Like, we're still going to reap the benefits or, you know, the negativities from people that have control of our favorite team that we ultimately have no control over. So
true.
I don't know.
Well, there were some things that happened since our last episode. A few movements, and again, things are starting to pick up. We're going from like a slow trickle to a little bit more of a steady flow of Vikings news coming out. So Alexander Mattison was the first domino to fall, so to speak, in terms of the Vikings moves this offseason. He was released.
And I was a little surprised by that move initially, especially when the news first came out and people were reporting that, like, oof, they really must not have wanted him because they ate like $2 or $3 million of dead cap just to get rid of him. But apparently that's not the case. I guess they did save $2 or $3 million of cap space ultimately by getting rid of him. And Dustin Baker said a few days ago, within the last few days, like, oh yeah, if we had known that like cutting him would have saved any money, let alone $2 to $3 million, like, we would have all been saying, oh yeah, Madison's a goner for sure. Yeah, we would have been saying that as early as like December, you know, like, so, but initially when I saw they had officially, well, when it was announced that they were going to release him, I was a little surprised. And I think everything I've heard about him, he's a really great dude, good teammate, good community member, great all the way around. And a pretty decent running back number 2. It's just the Vikings, I feel like everyone in their running back room is either garbage or running back 2. They need a running back 1, and maybe Ty Chandler can be that guy. Maybe they're planning on going after one of the big name free agent running backs that will be available, and maybe they're trying to draft somebody. That will be one position that I'm interested in seeing how they go about it.
Yeah, that's definitely an important position to fill this season. I don't know that I have complete confidence in Ty Chandler to be that guy. I think he showed flashes, and I think he proved that he's better fit for that RB1 role than Mattison was. So I wasn't super surprised by the fact that they released him. I was maybe surprised by the timing of it.
Yeah.
It seemed early, and it seemed sudden, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, not surprised that he's gone. And I think it opens up some possibilities to bring in a free agent or to draft a guy or to develop the guys that you have in that room, and hopefully somebody, whether it's Ty Chandler or somebody else, can bubble to the surface and become that guy.
Yeah. And I really liked Mattison as the running back too.
Yeah.
The guy that would come in for a few carries a game. And when the running back one inevitably gets injured for a few weeks, he showed throughout his 4 years as a Viking, 4 or 5, that he did well in spot starts. And I mean, there was a time where when Dalvin would go down, it wasn't even much of a concern, because the general consensus among Vikings fans is like, oh, Mattison is almost as good, so like this isn't a huge deal. I mean, it's not like we wanted Dalvin gone for that reason, but like it wasn't a huge deal because Dalvin always missed a couple of games here and there every season. So
yep.
I'll stand by it. A running back 2 is a legitimate position, and I think Alex Mattison did and will do good for the rest of his career in that position. I don't think he's done. Somebody's going to sign him. Like, he's good enough to. He had 700 yards rushing. Like, you don't just scrape by with that much. Sure, it's not a Pro Bowl amount of rushing yards, but like that's still decent. Like especially for a guy that's not the starter. Like, he's capable of that, and he'll latch on somewhere. I hope he does well.
Yeah. So that was the first move. I think maybe the first official move of the offseason.
I think so
to speak.
Theo Jackson signed a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, there were a few other ones.
Yeah.
But this was definitely a big move.
Yeah.
I mean,
the biggest splash so
big
far.
Big name. He was the guy the whole season. Couldn't really make it happen on the field. And so he hit the chopping block and he's gone. Another move on the positive side of things, Nick Muse was signed.
Yeah, so we're recording on Tuesday, and he was signed today, just a handful of hours ago. I think he was originally drafted in 22 by the Vikings in, I think, the 7th round. And he has yet to really get a bunch of opportunities on the field in the regular season. But I mean, he always, the preseason, and I think he had like 1 or 2 catches in the year.
He did.
He seemed like a guy that could develop into something. And he also seems like a good dude too. So like a funny guy. They've had him mic'd up a couple of times. And when you have some uncertainty around TJ Hawkinson, who's coming off torn almost everything important in your knee, and I've heard he may miss anywhere from the first couple of games to like the full first half of the season. I'm not an expert on any of that, but he's going to miss some time to begin the season. So if you have a guy like Nick Muse, who you have some confidence in, it's nice to get him signed for probably what is a minimum deal. I think I saw it was like $980,000 for this coming year. If it works and they're happy with it, go for it. That whole tight end position will be interesting this coming season because you still have Josh Oliver, who I've almost forgotten about, which is kind of crazy. Like, he was the first big free agent signing for the Vikings last year. And it's like, well, where is that guy? Like, what's he doing?
Well, I think his season was kind of forgettable, honestly. Yeah. I mean, he had a couple of key turnovers.
Well, one big one, I forget which
first
game.
Play of the game, wasn't it? Like a big catch for a big chunk of yards, and then boom, balls on the ground. And
yeah. But not to crap on him too much, he is more well known as being one of the best blocking tight ends in the league. So of course he's not. He didn't come in and they didn't tout him as this huge Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson receiving threat. So maybe he did have a fantastic season, and it's just you and I sitting on our couches aren't going to see every
amazing impact he has. So I don't know. I don't know enough to say yay or nay on if he's great, but he's probably going to head into the season as tight end 1.
Yeah, you're probably right.
As far as healthy guys. So
the biggest question that has dominated the offseason, and I mean it even started before the offseason, and we just keep coming back to it. I mean, we're kind of like deranged almost how much we've talked about this. And I mean, we talked about it last week with Dustin Baker and Wes Johnson, and here we are again, just right back at it. Kirk Cousins.
Kirky Kirk. Fantastic human being.
Yep.
At most times, a fantastic quarterback. A very savvy businessman, and potentially an Atlanta Falcon within a week or so.
So Mike Florio has, I think, been living and breathing the Kirk Cousins drama. I read something, and I don't know if this is legit or not, but something on Twitter or something kind of seems to imply that Mrs. Florio was talking with Mrs. Cousins.
Interesting.
And Mike Florio happened to be standing there, and Julie Cousins expressed frustration towards the Vikings organization for how slow they were moving and the fact that there wasn't a deal available for her husband yet. And I think Florio took that and ran with it and is maybe inflating some of these storylines a little bit to generate a narrative that she's unhappy and she wants to go to Atlanta. She's from Alpharetta, Georgia, which is a suburb of Atlanta. I don't know. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, okay, so let's pretend we can 100% assume all of that is the God's honest truth. Like, let's just live in a world where we know that that's the truth, even though we can't know that. I mean, if Kirk Cousins were to be, and family or whatever, were to be frustrated by what the public has seen, a lack of communication or negotiation, maybe a lack of overwhelming love from, Kwesi and front office, whatever, I could believe that. If I was Kirk Cousins and played, was an employee that performed that well in any position, and came time to re-up my agreement with my employer and was not getting much. Now, granted, we're not in those rooms. Maybe they've been spending many sleepless nights negotiating as much as humanly possible, or maybe they just haven't returned a phone call. We'll never know. But as far as the public has seen, there hasn't been really any movement. And if that were me, a really good employee for a highly touted organization, and they were kind of ghosting me a little bit or trying to get me for less than my perceived value, I'd be a little frustrated. So I could see a world where frustration exists. I could also see a company trying to get the best price, give the most competitive for them salary to the best talent that they can get at any position. And if you're Kwesi, we just talked, you're at a time where you need to define your position as the GM, make your mark, make sure that everybody knows this guy is a good, savvy GM. Look at all these moves he's made. The biggest thing you can do as a GM is hitch your horse to a franchise quarterback, a Pat Mahomes, what seems like a guy like CJ Stroud is on the first steps of becoming, a Tom Brady, these kinds of playmaking, a Josh Allen, these specifically great players that you can ride that wave for as long as possible. Whereas I could see maybe signing Kirk for 1 to 2 to 3 years. And if that fizzles out, how could you not see that? Why would you make that move? Why would you spend the Wilf's money that way? I could see that being a scary thing to do, especially if you're not 100% sure. Tom Brady at 36, you're signing to get that guy all day. Kirk Cousins, who was playing at an MVP level, is coming off a pretty significant injury, even if he is 100%. him at 36 is not Tom Brady at 36. So I can see both sides. And for all we know, the Vikings have tried everything. And Kirk's like, no, I'm good. We'll never know.
So you showed me, and I'd read snippets of this interview, but we watched quickly before we started recording tonight. Kevin O'Connell was sitting with
Rich Eisen.
Rich Eisen, there it was. I was going to say a different name.
And another guy, I forget who it was, on NFL Network during the Combine.
But they're at the Combine this week, and the Combine's still happening, right?
Yeah. I think
is it over?
Yeah, I think it's wrapped up at this point.
Anyways, it was a hotbed of conversation in the NFL. Most coaches were there, GMs were there, the media was there. Indy was just hopping with NFL buzz. It was kind of the place to be. And one of the things that's kind of, for me, bubbled to the surface is this issue of tampering.
Yeah. And
I was listening, I think it was Luke Braun on the Locked On Vikings podcast. I think this was yesterday, Monday, March 4th, on his episode there. He talked about his feelings about tampering, and he basically just said, like, it's fine. Like, coaches, players, agents, whoever should be able to have conversations at an event like the Scouting Combine. Everybody's in the same place. Like, how are they going to mandate what you can and can't talk about? And, you know, if Kirk's agent happens to run into Arthur Blank from the Falcons in the, you know, convention center near the stadium, you know, what's going to prevent them from talking about Kirk? And how's Roger Goodell and his office and any league compliance people, how are they going to know what was spoken about and that sort of thing? And that's not necessarily where Luke Braun went, but he was implying some of those things. And I got to thinking about that, like, well, yeah, like, it kind of seems to make sense. Like, as long as that player is no longer actively playing for that team, other teams should have the opportunity to have a conversation, at the very least, with their agent or with that player directly.
Yeah. You think that'd be in the best interest of the player and even the team overall? What the team trying to sign said player. Yeah. And for a long time, it was like, you can't legally talk to or even about other players on other teams. Otherwise, you could get gigged for it and lose draft picks and get fined. And there's still those rules, but a handful of years ago, I forget when they implemented this quote unquote legal tampering period, which they just need to rename that. Like, it should be just a negotiation period or whatever.
Right.
Like,
well, and as far as I know, the Dolphins are the only team to be dinged for that, right? Because of their tampering with Tom Brady. That,
oh yeah,
I mean, it ultimately ended up nothing happened. I mean, Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay.
Yeah, but there was something about that. I forget the details of that story, but yeah, there was something.
Didn't they lose a draft pick? Didn't the Dolphins, like?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the first round pick in last year's draft. Like, yeah, it was. They don't take it lightly. However, I think. So let's just use Kirk's situation earlier, and I'm not holding you to this verbiage, but you said as long as that player is no longer actively playing for that team. Kirk was no longer actively playing for the Vikings as of October, 8th or whatever it was. And if you don't have clear-cut rules or dates, like, you could say, yeah, there's a gray area. I was not going to play for that team again. Like, I physically couldn't, so why couldn't I legally talk to any other team? So that would be an extreme example of why you need to have some rules. And I agree, if there's like, the reason you can't tamper is like, okay, let's say you're in the playoffs and you're going to be a free agent and you're a quarterback and you know, like, you're Kirk Cousins, you know your team's not going to sign you to a huge deal. But maybe another team can legally call you up and say, like, hey, Kirk, or insert player here, if you lose to our team this week in the playoffs, we will guarantee you X amount of money. in your next contract. Like, that's where you get this whole like sketchy stuff going on,
throwing games,
and yeah, and if there's no rules against like communicating with other players, like that's an extreme example, but stuff like that could theoretically happen. Like, so I agree that there should be a time where you can negotiate with people when it's just clear as day. You're not going to be able to sign another guy, or the Vikings have put the cards on the table that this is what they're going to offer you, so go ahead and see if you can get something better. But also, I think it is what it is because like I think today or yesterday was the day that teams had to franchise tag people. And you could get pretty hairy if you already have something negotiated with another team, and then your current team franchise tags you, and then you can't negotiate with anybody. That's another year contract that you didn't have control over. So that's a moot point. But yeah, they're just trying to avoid the whole, hey, it's 12:01 a.m. on the day free agency starts, and all of a sudden there's huge reports of this guy signing a $100 million deal. Like, that didn't just get negotiated in the last minute. They need to figure it out perfectly. I don't think it's perfect yet. But I think there should be rules. You shouldn't just willy-nilly be able to talk to any player anytime.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with you on that too. I think like, and maybe it's just like the Super Bowl, like when the entire NFL season is over for good, no teams are playing anymore. Maybe that's it. Like, or maybe there's a week or 2 weeks or something where teams do have the opportunity to place the franchise tag, have those conversations. Like, you got to know at that point whether you've been done since week 18 or your team just played in the Super Bowl. You got to know who you're tagging. Like, I think I just saw today, excuse me, the Chiefs tagged L'Jarius Sneed. Like, they had to have known even before playing in the Super Bowl that they were going to do that. Like, GM, coach, like, they maybe had a list of players, like, these are the guys that we would potentially tag, but he was on that list.
Well, for sure. And a part of that is too, I'm sure there was hope to be able to negotiate a different kind of a deal, because the tag isn't really great for anybody. Yeah, the teams get to hold on to you for another year, but there's no long-term stability for the player. Yeah, it's always a good chunk of change. So the player has that backing of like, okay, I'm tagged, I'm getting this much money regardless if I, sign a long-term deal before the season, or if I break my leg on the first play, if I pull an Aaron Rodgers. Like, there is some financial stability, but it's also, I don't know how old Sneed is for the Chiefs. I would imagine he's not a 35-year-old player. If you're a young player and it's just you have 10 more years of playing ability, because if you get tagged, you're good enough to play long term. The players want the longer term deals. Teams want control over the players. I don't think the tag is the best option, but at least it does kind of scratch everybody's back a little bit. But yeah, back to the whole tampering idea. There should be, I don't think it's perfect yet. You should be able to scratch everybody's back in this scenario. Teams should be able to feel good about it. Players should be able to feel good about it. So I don't know. I don't know what the perfect scenario is.
Yeah, it has been really interesting. And obviously with Kirk basically being the biggest free agent story in the league.
Currently, yeah, he's the biggest free agent.
I mean, of course, everybody's going to want to know at the scouting combine what's happening with Kirk.
And to circle all the way back to the first part of this conversation we're having, it sounds like Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings are aware that other teams have been able to communicate their intentions to Kirk and his agents and whoever. And it sounds like the Vikings have seen the writing on the walls, and we've all seen the writing on the walls. Like, we all know Kirk is good. It just doesn't make a ton of sense for the Vikings to pay 40, 50, however much a year for Kirk. And now is the time for the Vikings to move on. Kirk, I've said it a million times on this podcast, every player should get every dime they can while they're able to. So if Kirk signs a $50 million a year deal, good for him. Like, that's legitimately awesome. And he might do just that. It's just probably not going to be with the Vikings.
And I think that's kind of what KOC was kind of implying. And he too, similar to Kwesi, is very controlled and calculated most of the time in his interview situations. And he seems like he's got some locked and loaded responses ready to go. But he said something to the tune of Kirk has earned the right to be a free agent. And I kind of balked at that a little bit. Like, well, he didn't earn the right to be a free agent because his contract expired. That's just the natural consequence of signing a contract that expires on whatever date, 2024. Like, that's just what's going to happen. However, I think what he was trying to articulate was Kirk has earned the right to garner the interest of all these other teams when his contract with the Vikings expires, which it's doing in a week or so.
Yeah.
And to that, I would say yes, 100%. He has played well enough to garner that interest from other teams. And there are some quarterback needy teams out there that are in the running in this Kirk Cousins sweepstakes. So it'll be pretty interesting to see, who comes forth with the best offer, or if he decides to stick it out with the Vikings, probably taking a discount of some sort. And
if I had to guess,
things going.
If I had to guess, I'm sure at this point the Vikings have expressed their top dollar offer. At this point, like, you don't get to a week before free agency in this scenario without saying, like, okay, Kirk, cards on the table, this is what we're going to do as of right now. So if this won't happen, but if Kirk goes out, hits free agency, and for whatever reason doesn't get that kind of a deal, a huge deal, which I'd be shocked at, if he then, I'm sure the Vikings will always be interested in signing him, but if it's like a couple of days into free agency and Kirk is still available, the Vikings number has gone a little bit lower. Just like if there's a bunch of suitors and everybody's interested, the Vikings number, if they were steadfast on signing him, would have to go higher. It's a supply and demand type deal. If there's demand, you gotta pay a little bit more for it. But I don't think Kirk is going to get screwed out of the situation. I think he's going to, whether it's the Falcons or the Steelers or some dark horse team. You could even look at the Buccaneers, who it seems like, Baker Mayfield did not get franchise tagged. And there's still a few days until free agency, so he could sign a longer term deal. But, he's still at this moment set to be a free agent. Maybe the Buccaneers are interested in Kirk Cousins. I don't know. Kirk's going to get paid, and good for him. And I, for one, am excited to see the potential storylines of what the Vikings do in the draft and maybe even in free agency at quarterback. I don't think if the plan is to do something at the draft, then you need to get up. You need to move up. You can't stay at 11. But also, you can't spend money on guys in free. You can't go out and get Baker and say, oh, we're also going to draft a guy, because you already have, not saying Nick Mullins is as good as Baker Mayfield, but you have Nick Mullins under contract. Like, he's your QB2. Go get your drafted QB1.
You said something interesting to me before we started recording. We were just kind of shooting the breeze about Russell Wilson and how he was released by the Broncos this week. And you seemed to be warming to the idea of Mr. Unlimited coming to Minnesota, at least as a bridge quarterback on a vet minimum contract.
That's the thing. That's the thing right there. Russell Wilson is a dumpster fire. Like, it would be a circus. It would be crazy. Like, I'd almost rather sign Tim Tebow right now than Russell Wilson. Which, yes, I don't know. But if you get a Russell Wilson, who had some bright spots last season a little bit with the Broncos, it just ultimately didn't work out. More dark spots than bright spots. But theoretically, he could be had to the Vikings, a veteran minimum deal, like less than $1.5 million. Like, at that point, you could sign him and still trade the house and get up to pick number 3 or whatever and still draft your quarterback of the future. And then you got Russell. However, you'd need to have Russell Wilson be able to sign on for this. It could be a scenario like what we had with Donovan McNabb and Christian Ponder. It's just hopefully it would work out way better than that. But yeah, an older guy who, again, he would have to be okay with coming in as a starter probably, but given the reins over whenever he was told to, because he's getting something like $39-40 million no matter what this coming season.
Did I read correctly that that's the highest cap hit for a released player
maybe
in NFL history?
I'm not sure. So I didn't read anything. So if you did, I'll defer to you. I wouldn't be surprised.
I can't speak confidently on that, but I feel like I saw something. You know what that makes me think of? You've only seen this movie once, but I've seen it far more than you have. Moneyball. There's a scene where Billy Beane was talking to David Justice in the batting cage, and they're kind of having a little heart-to-heart, and Billy Beane is trying to convince David Justice to, be a leader in the clubhouse and whatever, and Billy Beane's kind of like, well, you kind of think you're a big deal, and David Justice is like, well, yeah, you're paying me this many millions of dollars to play for you. So yeah, I'm kind of a big deal. And Billy Beane fires back and he goes, no, the Yankees are paying $10 million. That's what they think of you. You're worth more to them not on their team than you are on their team. And so I'm totally butchering the quote, but that was the gist of the scene. And
yeah. So,
that's kind of the way it is with Russell Wilson.
Broncos are paying Russell something like $39 million.
Worth more away from them than he is with them.
Which I can get that. Like if you make a mistake that the Broncos did, former Vikings assistant GM George Payton, I mean, he made a mistake. I don't know how that guy has a job sending all those picks and spending all that money and then sending more picks because they had to trade a first and maybe even a second as well to get Sean Payton from the Saints because they still held his rights. Sending all those picks to try to fix a situation and then ultimately get to the point that it's like Russell, it's going to be worse with him on the field than with somebody else. Like to spend all that capital and then ultimately owning it and being like, you know what? That money's already spent. Like we need to go in a different direction. That's tough. I don't think George Payton is long for the league. I'm surprised he is still a GM after this whole flop of a quarterback situation.
If Russell Wilson ends up a Viking for however long, if what are the odds that he gets an office?
Oh, I don't know.
At TCL.
I don't know. But I saw somebody on Twitter a long time ago say, when the whole like Russell Wilson stuff was starting to first be almost joked about, somebody was like, oh, if he comes here, he's totally going to ruin Skol for us. Like, it's like, all I think is like Mr. Unlimited. And then when he says like Broncos country, let's ride. Like if I was a Broncos fan, and I know a couple, I should ask them, like, how do they feel about the whole let's ride thing now? Like, does that just...
That had to have been a huge marketing ploy that some team marketing staff member was like, oh, we got Russell Wilson now. We're totally... This is going to take off and it's going to revolutionize everything.
But think about Skol. That kind of like...
a huge joke.
Skol kind of came up when the new stadium opened. Like, it's... People haven't been saying Skol since the 70s, like maybe, but it hasn't been a huge thing. But it's our mantra now, like Skol. We Skol every episode. We're the Skol hop. If I just know if he comes in, and I agree with whoever tweeted that, I couldn't tell you who said it. If he came in, he would just ruin it for it. Vikings, let's Skol. Like he would ruin it so bad, and we would have to abandon it. Like if he signs, get ready to not say Skol ever again.
It would be sad.
We would have to rename the podcast.
Well, yeah, we'll figure that out. But the Skol clap, the Skol chant at the stadium, like that's a cool tradition.
I think it's kind of cheesy.
Well, you can think it's cheesy. I've been there twice. It's super cool.
In the stadium, I'm the world's biggest Skol chant fan. I'll do it. I'll make my hands blister from Skol chanting so hard. I also recognize it's kind of cheesy, but like I would never do it at home. Like
I teach my kids how to do it.
That's so awesome. That's the best. I don't know. You get to do whatever you want. I think it's kind of cheesy outside of, kind of like wearing a jersey outside of the stadium. Which I'm realizing you've done that as well. You've never actually worn a jersey in the stadium. You've only ever worn a jersey.
No, when I was a kid going to games, I think I wore a jersey, but not that one. One's been in that case since I got it.
Yeah, I'm alienating all two of our fans here. Yeah, but I just know Russell Wilson. He's gonna ruin that for us, and why did I just say it like that? Is that if he's about to sign? I don't think he's gonna sign. I wouldn't immediately like punch a hole through a door if he signed with the Vikings at this point.
And it's a pretty like outside possibility. Like it doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
No.
The reality of Kirk leaving the Vikings, that seems
like it's going to happen.
Pretty realistic.
Seems like it's already happened.
Yeah. I'm still holding out hope, and obviously there's a ton to know between now and whenever that happens, but you're going for another one here.
I am. We each had 3. I will say, just to go off on a way different tangent, I'm about to open my 3rd beer here.
I'll go with you here because I've got one more.
Nice. And as I'm getting down lower in my first 2, I guess, the temperature of the beer, it's not as ice cold as it was when it first got poured. And a little bit warmer, I'm more noticing the like Oreo type flavor of it.
Yeah.
The cookies and cream type flavor of it.
And I would also say the smoothness of it maybe dropped off a little bit.
Yeah.
As it's warmed up. Not that it's bad. It's not bad.
No.
But because truth be told, there are some beers when they get warm, they're just bad.
Oh yeah. A lot of beers are almost undrinkable once you get warmer. But this one, for me, I like it ice cold, but I think I get it. I think I get the bit a little bit more when it's just, again, not warm. These beers are not warm in our hands.
Slightly less than ice cold.
Not even as warm as lukewarm, but like, yeah.
Slightly less than ice cold.
Yeah. So I think I might enjoy it a little bit more. So like, let's just say ice cold is 35 degrees. Maybe at 45 degrees, I like it more. I'm not an expert, so I'm just talking out of my butt here. But like, yeah, I think I get the flavors a little bit more the couple of degrees warmer it gets.
I once had a friend who theorized that the better the beer is, like the higher quality it is, the better it tastes when it's warm.
I could see that.
So like your cheap domestics,
it's got to be ice cold. Yeah.
Pick your poison. And I feel the same way. Yes, It's got to be cold. Like, you cannot have a warm Coors Light or a warm Bud Light or a warm Miller Light or whatever. Like, it's got to be, the mountains have to be blue. If they're not, I'm probably not drinking it.
Yeah.
Unless I'm
probably
desperate.
still going to drink it.
And be like slightly blue. But anyways, this, like, yeah, you could drink this. Not like, you wouldn't want it like
room temperature.
Water.
No.
Room temperature. Yeah, like you'd want it cold, but it doesn't have to be. I just got this out of the fridge. Cold.
Yeah. Yeah. Little mid-episode review here. So yeah, I guess Vikings talkers. Another thing that happened since our last episode is those NFLPA report cards came out.
Yep.
I think it came out the day after we spoke with Dustin and Wes, and I'm pretty sure Dustin made a note. Like he even like commented like, "Oh yeah, the Vikings are a good place to play," and he said like, "I expect the report cards to come out soon," and they may have even come out between us talking to him and us releasing the episode. But yeah, they're out, and the Vikings are ranked number 2. If you remember last year, 23, they were ranked number 1. So they technically went down a spot. But I feel like in those types of rankings, like once you're in the top, whatever it is, the top 5 or whatever, like they're all good places to be. And I think I saw something, maybe an article or something, where it said like the Dolphins, who were ranked number 1 this year over the Vikings, and then the Vikings, and then there was a pretty sizable gap, and then number 3, and I don't remember who number 3 was. But that just tells you everything you need to know about the Dolphins and Vikings organizations as far as being a player within those organizations. Overall, sounds like a great place or places to be. And I'd imagine the Dolphins, a lot of that is the income tax type deal. But we've talked about McDaniel and how we think he seems like a cool dude, their coach for Miami. Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting with the new stadium, newer, I guess it's almost 6, 7, 8 years old at this point. The newer facility at TCO, the coaching, everything as far as players go, they seem to like Minnesota.
And I think that's interesting because of what Dustin said last week on our episode too, that, and I didn't even really realize this, but the roster turnover, I mean, there are very few players that are still around from Kwesi's first season to now. Kwesi and Kevin's first season.
Yeah,
I mean,
even from when they were first hired, that day they were first hired, the roster has turned over pretty much 100%.
Yeah. And that's crazy to think, one, that that's happened, and then two, to think that the overall culture of the organization has maintained this high level despite all of the constant ins and outs, trades and releases and cuts and you know, whatever, acquisitions, you know, new guys coming in, guys leaving. The culture has remained very, very strong despite those things. And yeah, that definitely says something about the leadership for sure.
Yeah, and it seems that way out on the outside as well. So it's nice to see the videos of KOC giving his pep talk after the games and giving out the game balls, and to see all the media things, everything on Twitter and like YouTube, everything that the Vikings put out seems like a positive thing. I think of the like Friday challenge videos they put out where they have like a whole almost like escape room that they put out for these players to walk in every week. It's nice as a fan to see that and feel good about that, and think it's fun and exciting, and then to have actual like report cards put out with feedback from the people that are in that building saying like, yeah, it is nice to be here. The game ball speeches after the game, it is nice. The facility, it is nice. Like it's nice to know that your favorite team, the people that are there, like to be there. Unlike, I'm sure for a lot of years, being a Detroit Lion was probably not the most fun thing to do. Like, I'm sure even for a lot of years being a Viking when they were still at Winter Park with like Red McCombs and like those types of times, and maybe it wasn't the most fun place to be, but I mean, it's nice to know that the Vikings players like being Vikings players.
Yeah, for sure. Is it just players? I don't even know. Is it just players that are...
I don't know enough about it to know for sure, but I think it is. I don't think it's every single player, but I think it's a majority of, or a good selection of the players on every team that fill out whatever survey it is.
And the other question I would have is, how long have they been doing this, and could we go back and look at like past results?
I feel like this is a relatively newish thing.
It seems like it to me. But
I don't think I ever heard of it before last year when the Vikings were ranked number 1. Like, and maybe that's because the Vikings have never been that high and it just never really got talked about. But like, it feels like something within the last few years that they started doing.
Yeah, definitely something worth researching.
Yeah, we should check that out.
Could be kind of interesting to follow the trends, and definitely something to follow in the future if they continue to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I guess other things we can talk about that we checked out, or at least I checked out. We don't have to go through in depth of these articles that I've listed out, but for our listeners, I kind of want to point them. If you're looking for things out there to read or check out before free agency, or to kind of figure out what's going on, I've just found 3 different articles from around the internet that maybe Vikings fans would be interested in checking out. Did you read really any of them? I kind of sent them to you this afternoon. So
yeah, I was able to kind of skim each one. So the first one was the Vikings Territory article written by Dustin Baker.
First one by Dustin Baker on VikingsTerritory.com. I'll let you guys, for all 3 of these, I'll let you guys check them out on your own. But the first one is Vikings current roster with free agency 1 week away. And Dustin does a good job of kind of listing out every upcoming free agent the Vikings have, because they're all technically under contract right now with the Vikings, unless they've been released, like Alex Mattison. And then he takes those guys out of the list and gives a good depth chart based on who's still there and where they were on the depth chart last season, to right before the free agency starts, right before the draft. If you're a Vikings fan, you're not really too sure where they're sitting on any position. Dustin did a good job of breaking down what the roster looks like before any major offseason moves. And I think he put that out before or after the Alex Mattison move, so it already takes him off.
Something I found interesting from that article, because I don't think this has happened yet. Correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong. But I don't think Greg Joseph has been released yet.
So he is one of those, his contract is expiring.
Oh, is it officially expired?
I don't think any of them officially expire until March 13th, when the league year ends. So when free agency starts, I think that's like midnight on the league year. So at this very moment, he is under contract with the Vikings, but he only has a week left of his contract.
So I found it interesting, and I guess I didn't go through that article with a fine-tooth comb, but for kicker on his depth chart, on Dustin's depth chart, he listed none.
Yeah, because he took out all the guys that will expire.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So it was even on quarterback, his depth chart lists Nick Mullins as QB1 at this moment, because Kirk's contract will expire.
That makes more sense.
But yeah, that's right. And we tweeted that out, that hey, this is kind of an underrated thing, but kicker can make or break a game sometimes. And the Vikings, as of the start of free agency, do not have a kicker on the roster. And they probably shouldn't sign Greg Joseph.
Yep.
Probably a good guy, but you pointed out a handful of episodes ago, a lower league, bottom of the league kicker.
He was one of my first to go.
Yep.
I mean, I think he was in my top 3 in terms of free agents to let walk.
Yep.
Because of his just inconsistency. Is he a bad kicker? No, he's not the worst in the league.
I think he's maybe top 25.
Yeah, well, he's not
32.
He's not top tier.
No, he's not even top half.
He's a lower tier kicker that is serviceable most of the time, but struggles.
He's a guy that we may never hear from again, and if we do, it might be because some team had multiple injuries at their kicker position. I don't think he's latching on anywhere else. Just every year, there's a whole new batch of college kids coming out that can at least kick a field goal, and they're going to get an opportunity before a guy that has proven to be a bottom tier NFL kicker. So the Vikings will find either a rookie or a free agent. I don't even know who's available, but we know it's not like Justin Tucker. So
yeah, there are a handful of free agents, I think, but none that are I think worth paying a bunch of money for.
Yeah.
So it might be worth picking somebody up in a later round in the draft.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or undrafted free agent. So
another article I had listed out was from Matthew Collar on Purple Insider. And I don't know, we can either tweet these articles out or put them in the show notes or something. We'll figure out, if you're interested, we'll figure out a way to easily get them in front of you guys. But this one from Matthew Collar is all the indie buzz surrounding the Vikings. And this specific article is kind of just a conglomeration of different paragraphs of certain stories that have come up, Vikings related throughout Combine Week. So it can be a little bit of a longer read if you do choose to read the whole thing. But if you have kind of not really paid too much attention to the Vikings since the end of the season, or if you've been really busy at work or something, you just haven't really followed Twitter every second of every day about the Vikings, this could be a good read to be like, oh, I guess this is where the Vikings stand as of now, right before free agency. It could be a good wake up or collection of information for those that are not fully up to date.
Yeah, and maybe don't read the headlines too closely, but actually read the paragraphs, because I think the first headline had something to do with Justin Fields coming to the Vikings.
Yeah.
But then it was, he went on to describe the hypothetical situation of what could happen, and I don't know. It was maybe not the most I should say this differently. It was a little more of a clickbaity headline.
The headline, yeah, but Matthew did a pretty good job in his explanation of like kind of explaining what the headline was and then what you should really think about it or what the actual story is. But yeah, overall, I think that's a good one. And then just the last one I had listed out was from CBS Sports, written by Cody Benjamin. And it's Kevin O'Connell hints at Kirk Cousins tampering. It's just basically an article form of what we talked about earlier, the Kirk Cousins situation. Kevin O'Connell's comments on NFL Network during the Combine and how maybe there might have been a little bit of tampering going on. But either way, it's still a good, really short, but really concise and good read from Cody Benjamin over there. So,
and that article kind of made me think, and some of this came out already when we were talking about tampering, but like made me think like, was Kevin O'Connell maybe implying that there was some tampering going on, and is he uncomfortable with that, or is he trying to call that out? Is he trying to bring attention to that to, you know, possibly levy some sort of punishment or fine or whatever?
Although, I think if in that situation, I don't think it would be like, let's just pretend that the Falcons are fully, without a doubt, you know, guilty of tampering. Like,
well, they certainly seem like they're fully focused on Kirk Cousins.
But let's fast forward and pretend there's a world where the NFL is like, yeah, you broke the rules. If they were punished, it's not like if they lose a draft pick that the Vikings would get that draft pick. Like, I think it would just be that whatever team that tampers is punished, and not necessarily any other team reaps the rewards of that team being punished.
Justice will be served, but there's not any sort of like...
Yeah, just like when Bountygate was proven to be true and Sean Payton was suspended for a year, they didn't rip that Lombardi trophy away from the Saints, even though they cheated. The Vikings didn't benefit. If anything, the whole league was altered because they changed some rules on like overtime and stuff, and yeah, the Vikings didn't get anything for being totally cheated on, but yeah, so it would just be against whoever broke the rules.
Yeah, well, it is interesting, and I don't know, maybe there will be a headline soon about some of that, because it's interesting. The other thought I had, not to cut you off, but the other thought I had was maybe the NFL wants this. Maybe they're lacking other storylines, and they're just like, yeah, sure, fine. If you guys want to talk about Kirk Cousins during Combine, whatever, go for it.
I mean, anytime you're talking about the Vikings, well, I'm kind of rethinking what I'm about to say. But anyways, anytime you're talking about the Vikings potentially being on the list of teams interested in Justin Fields, you know the information well has run dry. And the only reason I kind of stopped there and said maybe I'm rethinking it is the Vikings do not currently have a bona fide running back one. So maybe they do look at Justin Fields, and I'm totally joking. I know he is not going to legitimately be a running back, but that's the only way I'd be happy if they signed Justin Fields.
He could be a Taysom Hill type gadget.
I don't want him. If he was ever on my team at this point, and I've said it before, draft night when he was drafted, I wanted the Vikings to get him really bad. I was really excited about that and then really mad when the Bears jumped up and drafted him. But now, having seen him for 4 years? 3 years, 4 years, I would not want that man throwing the ball at all on my team. No, he is not a good quarterback. He's an electric athlete and a really good running back. He is not a good quarterback. Come at me. So yeah, all that to say, information is low. Storylines are drying up, and free agency is about to begin, which is just going to ignite the NFL fire yet again.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Well, I guess that's why I said, right, maybe the NFL is justifying this a little bit and giving whoever might be tampering a little bit of a pass. Like, okay, this is generating some talk.
Yeah, we're getting the views and the clicks.
Yeah. So, well, the next week will definitely be interesting, and I think next week's episode, we'll have more to talk about.
Yeah.
And we'll have more to hash out, and we might be talking about a new quarterback in Minnesota. We might be talking about Kirk not in Minnesota. We might be talking about things that we haven't even really talked about tonight, like a restructured JJ contract or Daniil Hunter getting his money. Like there could be quite a few things that
there's
develop.
A lot of storylines that are right on the tip of our tongues here that could happen at any second.
Yep.
My watch has buzzed a few times, and we could already be outdated right now because of a big NFL storyline that we didn't know about.
Hopefully we're not, but maybe by the time you listen to this, you're more in the know than we were at the time of recording. But that's the way the world works, and that's the way podcasting works.
That's the way the cookie crumbles.
That is the way the cookie crumbles. This cookie crumbled nicely.
Yeah, it did. I almost kind of want to like hold my hands on it and let it warm up a couple of degrees. It was really good right out of the can, but the few sips I had when it was starting to get a little bit warmer, they really hit for me.
My favorite moment right now is just that split second when my nose is right here.
Yeah, you're just enjoying every experience of the beer.
You bring in the aroma, and then you get the taste, and it just all comes together. Like, it's good.
It's a whole experience, and I like it a lot.
It is definitely much different than either of the beers that we would gravitate towards. And I would agree with you. It is not something that I'm going to have often. It's not something that I'm going to, have in my fridge on any given night.
But some nights, yeah.
Some nights, yes.
And maybe the next handful of episodes, we'll keep trying these Nitro beers from No Coast.
So we've got a couple more to try, perhaps, the coffee and the s'mores.
Yep.
So, yeah, stay tuned. See if we follow through on that or not. We might. It's definitely an idea that's in the hopper. The Skol hopper.
The Skol hopper. All right. If you have any thoughts or opinions on anything we've said tonight or didn't say, I don't know, where can they reach out to us, Ev?
Pretty much everywhere. We're, the internet is a vast ocean, but there are platforms.
Yeah.
And we're on most of the big ones.
Yeah.
So that's where you can find us. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Unless Facebook's down.
Yeah. I was a little busy. I didn't really know that happened until after the fact, but I'd say Twitter's one of the best places.
Easiest, fastest way to get a hold of us.
Yep. But you can email us.
Yeah. theskolhop@gmail.com.
Yep. Just, search for us anywhere. The Skol Hop or at the Skol Hop.
Go to our website. We have a contact us page.
Yep. So, there's a lot of places. And we want to hear from you. We want to know what you think about what we've talked about tonight. We want to know your beer suggestions.
Yeah.
Iowa beers. If there's a good beer brewed in Iowa that we haven't tried yet,
we need to try it.
Let us know.
And if our listeners are looking for a good deal on all-inclusive resorts in Mexico or Jamaica, where can they reach out to?
They should send an email to bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com.
There you go. Yeah. We haven't really mentioned them in episode for a couple episodes, but yeah, Big Top Ventures, they're still a faithful sponsor. We love them very much, and they really do. Even if you're halfway interested in seeing prices, like they've got some good deals for Mexico and Jamaica, so check them out.
Yeah. All right. Well, good beer.
Great beer. Great episode. Great beer. Here's to the 2024 Minnesota Vikings.
Preach. All right. We're going to get this right this time. Ready?
Skol.
Skol.
Yes.
Nice. Hey Vikings fans, Evan here from the Skol Hop, and we just wanted to say thank you again so much for listening to the Skol Hop, and we also wanted to take one more opportunity to let you know that this episode of the Skol Hop has been brought to you by Big Top Ventures. If you're considering taking an all-inclusive trip to either Mexico or Jamaica, reach out to our friends at Big Top Ventures at bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. Once again, that's bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com.
You can get the lowest rate possible on several all-inclusive resorts throughout the region. Big Top Ventures. Step right up to your next big adventure. And thanks again for listening to the Skol Hop. Skol.